What if everything you've been taught to avoid, every misstep, every failure, was actually the key to becoming your best self? In a world where success is celebrated and failure is feared, it's easy to see setbacks as barriers, something to dread or hide. But as the Stoic philosopher Seneca once said, difficulties strengthen the mind as labor does the body. What if, instead of running from failure, we embraced it as the ultimate teacher? Stoicism, an ancient philosophy designed for practical living, offers a radically different perspective. It invites us to see failure not as the end of the road, but as the beginning of growth. In this video, we'll explore how the Stoics reframed failure, why they believed it was essential for building resilience, and how their timeless wisdom can help us transform our struggles into stepping stones for personal development. By the end, you might just look at failure in a whole new light. Imagine you've been working hard toward a big goal. Maybe it's landing a job you've been dreaming about, acing an important exam, or starting a new business venture. You pour everything into it, your time, your energy, your hopes, but then it doesn't work out. You don't get the job, the exam doesn't go your way, or your business idea stumbles. That sinking feeling sets in, and you might start questioning yourself. What went wrong? Am I not good enough? This is where many people stop, consumed by self-doubt or even shame. But the Stoics teach us to stop looking at failure as a sign of personal inadequacy, and instead see it for what it really is: feedback. Epictetus, one of the most practical minds of Stoicism, put it plainly: difficulties show a person who they are. To the Stoics, failure wasn't a reason to dwell in self-pity or spiral into negativity. It was an opportunity to learn, a mirror revealing where we need to grow. They believed every setback, no matter how painful, was a valuable teacher offering insight into what we could improve. Take a moment to think about it. When you fail at something, it's rarely random. More often, failure reveals specific gaps in your approach, skill set, or mindset. Maybe you didn't prepare enough, or your focus was in the wrong place. Maybe circumstances exposed a weakness you weren't even aware of. But instead of letting failure define you, the Stoics urge us to reflect deeply and ask, what can this teach me? This process of self-reflection, grounded in honesty, not self-criticism, is central to the Stoic practice. Consider someone who trains for a marathon but comes up short on race day. One response might be to give up running entirely, convinced they're just not good enough, but a Stoic would take a different approach. They'd examine the situation. Did their training program lack structure? Did they neglect proper rest or nutrition? Was their mindset during the race overly focused on the outcome instead of the effort? Through this reflection, they'd uncover actionable lessons and use those lessons to return stronger. The failure then becomes a stepping stone rather than a stumbling block. What makes this perspective so powerful is that it shifts your focus. Instead of seeing failure as a reflection of your worth, you start seeing it as a guide. It points out what needs attention, where your efforts could be better directed, and what areas of your life or work you might have overlooked. Failure offers clarity. It strips away illusions and forces you to confront reality head-on. And while that might feel uncomfortable, it's an essential part of growth. Epictetus reminds us that we cannot learn without pain. But the Stoics also believe this pain is productive. It's the discomfort that comes with improvement. Every champion athlete, every groundbreaking scientist, every creative genius has failed repeatedly. What sets them apart isn't that they avoided failure. It's that they used it as data, as feedback to refine their skills, adjust their strategies, and persist. So the next time you face a setback, pause for a moment. Ask yourself, what did this experience reveal? What can I do differently next time? Failure doesn't have to be the end of the story. In fact, for the Stoics, it's just the beginning of a new, better one that you have the power to write. Let's consider a scenario you lose your job unexpectedly. It's an external failure, one that can feel overwhelming and catastrophic. Your mind might race with questions like, "Why did this happen to me?" or "What will I do next?" But stop for a moment and reflect. How much of this situation was truly within your control? In the teachings of Stoicism, this distinction between what we can and cannot control is absolutely pivotal. Epictetus, one of Stoicism's most influential voices, famously said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." This principle is at the heart of Stoic resilience. The Stoics believed that while we can't dictate external events like whether we keep a job, pass an interview, or avoid every misfortune, we hold complete control over one essential thing: our response. And that's where we should focus our efforts. Think about it this way: life is a mix of factors we influence and factors we don't. External circumstances like the economy, other people's decisions, or even the weather lie beyond our reach. But what we can control is our attitude, our actions, and the way we choose to interpret events. The Stoics taught that when we focus on what's within our sphere of control, we not only regain a sense of clarity, but we also stop wasting energy on things we cannot change. So how does this apply when you face a setback like losing a job? The Stoic approach would encourage you to start by acknowledging the reality of the situation without blaming yourself for factors you had no influence over. Instead of replaying the what-ifs or obsessing over the fairness of it all, you could shift your focus to a more constructive question: what can I do now? You might not control the decision that led to your dismissal, but you do control how you respond. Will you wallow in frustration, or will you take this as an opportunity to reassess your career path, refine your skills, or pursue a new direction? This shift in focus from external circumstances to internal resilience is liberating. It empowers you to regain agency in situations that might otherwise make you feel helpless. And it all begins with the Stoic practice of reframing. Instead of labeling the job loss as a purely negative event, you could start seeing it as a challenge to strengthen your adaptability and perseverance. Maybe it's even a chance to reflect on whether that job aligned with your values and long-term goals. To make this principle more actionable, imagine approaching every setback with what the Stoics call a reserve clause. It's the idea of mentally adding the phrase, "if it's within my control," to your plans. For example, instead of saying, "I will get this promotion," you might say, "I will do everything within my control to position myself for this promotion if it's meant to be." This subtle shift reminds you that outcomes involve external factors you can't command, but your preparation, effort, and attitude, those are always yours to manage. Let's revisit the job loss scenario. You can't rewrite the past, but you can focus on updating your resume, reaching out to contacts, or learning new skills. Even in situations where external outcomes remain uncertain, you can control how prepared, composed, and resilient you are moving forward. This mindset doesn't just help you recover from failure, it transforms how you see it altogether. Failure becomes less about something happening to you, and more about how you choose to grow through it. The beauty of this practice lies in its simplicity. Whenever you face adversity, ask yourself, what here is actually within my control? You may find that the answer is smaller than you'd like, but it's also far more powerful than you think. By directing your energy toward what you can influence, you reclaim ownership over the narrative of your life. Failure might knock you down, but it doesn't have to dictate how or even if you get back up. That part is entirely up to you. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and one of the most celebrated Stoic philosophers, once wrote, "What stands in the way becomes the way." He described challenges and obstacles as a kind of fire. Setbacks and difficulties are thrown into it, but instead of extinguishing the flames, they are consumed as fuel. In other words, adversity doesn't stop the fire, it makes it burn brighter and stronger. This powerful metaphor captures the Stoic belief that resilience isn't just about enduring hardship, it's about using it to grow, adapt, and thrive. The Stoics saw hardships, including failure, not as interruptions to life, but as essential ingredients for personal development. They believed that if we embrace challenges with the right perspective, they can shape us into more capable, stronger individuals. To them, adversity was like the forge for shaping steel. It applies intense pressure, but this very process is what strengthens and transforms it. Without the heat, without the hammering, the steel remains weak. And without hardship, we too remain stagnant. This mindset fundamentally changes how we view failure. For most of us, failure triggers emotions like frustration, embarrassment, or even despair. But by adopting the Stoic lens, we can reframe failure as an opportunity, an invitation to practice resilience. It's not about pretending failure doesn't hurt. It's about looking directly at that pain and asking, how can this make me better? When failure is no longer seen as the enemy, but as a necessary part of self-growth, our emotional response starts to shift. Instead of being paralyzed by fear or regret, we become curious, even optimistic about what we can learn from the experience. To cultivate this resilience, the Stoics encouraged a focus on internal strength. They believed that while we cannot avoid the challenges life throws at us, we can control how we respond. And the key lies in preparation. Stoics like Seneca practiced what's known as premeditation of evils, the deliberate act of imagining potential hardships in advance, not to dwell on negativity, but to mentally rehearse resilience before adversity strikes. This exercise builds an inner fortitude, a kind of emotional readiness, so that when failure or difficulty occurs, we face it with a centered mind rather than reacting impulsively. Let's look at an example. Imagine failing at launching a new project, whether it's a business venture, a creative endeavor, or a personal goal. The immediate reaction might be self-doubt or frustration. But through the Stoic approach, you could pause and ask yourself, what constructive lessons can I take from this? What parts of my strategy need refining? What skills can I improve? By framing the setback as feedback, you're no longer stuck in a cycle of disappointment. Instead, you're turning the experience into an opportunity to develop wisdom, perseverance, and creativity. This mindset doesn't just help us bounce back from failure, it changes our relationship with it entirely. Resilience, in Stoic terms, isn't just about weathering the storm. It's about letting the storm refine you. Failures, challenges, and adversities are not signals of weakness but reminders of the strength we're capable of building. The more we face, the more resilient we become. Each setback, every obstacle, is a chance to add another layer to our character, just as the fire strengthens steel. So, how would it feel if failure no longer filled you with dread? What if instead it became a moment to test your internal fire, to see how brightly it can burn in the face of difficulty? By viewing hardships as fuel, as Marcus Aurelius urged, we stop fearing the inevitable ups and downs of life. Instead, we start welcoming them as essential parts of the journey, knowing they will leave us stronger, wiser, and more prepared for whatever comes next. Picture this: you've just poured months of effort into a big project, something you were deeply passionate about and fully committed to. Maybe it was a business pitch you worked tirelessly on, or perhaps it was an audition for a role you've dreamed of. But then, the outcome wasn't what you hoped for. The pitch gets rejected, or someone else gets the part. In that moment, it's hard to see anything but failure. Disappointment takes over, and your mind starts echoing thoughts like, what was the point of all that effort? It feels overwhelming, like the world has closed a door on you. But what if, instead of dwelling on the loss, you paused for a moment and took a step back? What if you looked at this situation through a wider lens, not just the immediate sting of failure, but the bigger picture of your life and goals? This is exactly what Stoicism encourages, the power to reframe failure by broadening your perspective. Seneca, one of the great Stoic thinkers, wrote, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." This quote serves as a reminder that our perception of failure is often worse than the failure itself. Yes, the rejection hurts, but have you truly lost everything? Or is it possible this setback is just one small moment in the much larger journey of your life? The Stoics believed that many of our strongest emotional reactions come from focusing too narrowly on a single moment, while forgetting the impermanence of hardships and the opportunities they often create. Let's go back to that rejected project or audition. In the grand scheme of your career or personal growth, is this one setback really the defining moment? The Stoics would argue that it's not. Instead, they would guide you to see it as one thread in the larger tapestry of your life, a tapestry that includes learning, adapting, and ultimately moving forward with greater wisdom. Sometimes failure is just a redirection, leading you to an opportunity or lesson you couldn't have foreseen. So how do you begin shifting your perspective in moments like these? The first practical step is to pause, not to suppress your emotions, but to give yourself the space to process them objectively. Often, in the heat of failure, our thoughts spiral and we amplify the problem in our mind. Taking a moment to breathe and reflect can help break this cycle. Ask yourself, will this matter a week from now, a year from now, 5 years from now? Most failures lose their weight when viewed through the lens of time. What feels monumental today often becomes a mere stepping stone when you look back on it later. Another effective approach is to practice gratitude even in the face of failure. This might sound counterintuitive, but think about it. No matter how disappointing the outcome, there are usually aspects of the experience that contributed to your growth. Maybe you learned new skills while working on the project, or perhaps you developed stronger discipline and focus. When you shift your attention from what you lost to what you gained, failure starts to look less like an ending and more like a transition. Finally, reflect on what this failure may be trying to teach you. The Stoics saw every challenge as a lesson in disguise. They believed life sends us obstacles not to break us, but to mold us into stronger versions of ourselves. Ask yourself, what could I do differently next time? What blind spots did this reveal? How can I grow from this experience? These questions move you away from self-defeating thoughts and toward constructive action. When we adopt this Stoic practice of reframing, failure loses much of its sting. Instead of seeing it as something to fear, we can see it as a natural and even necessary part of progress. Rejections, missteps, and disappointments don't define us, they refine us. And by stepping back, giving ourselves the gift of perspective, we open the door to a more resilient, resourceful mindset. So the next time you face failure, remember, it's not the end of the story. In fact, it might just be the beginning of a better one. Failure, at its core, is a form of discomfort. It challenges our ego, our plans, and often our sense of identity. But what if discomfort wasn't something to avoid? What if instead it became something to embrace, a way to build a stronger, more resilient version of yourself? This is precisely what the Stoics practiced, and it's a mindset that's just as relevant today as it was centuries ago. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor, constantly reminded himself of the inevitability of challenges. He wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." To the Stoics, life's difficulties, whether large failures or small inconveniences, weren't interruptions to peace. They were opportunities to practice resilience. Discomfort wasn't something to run from, it was a necessary part of becoming better. The Stoics took this idea even further by deliberately seeking out discomfort. They believed that by exposing ourselves to controlled challenges, we prepare for the unexpected hardships life will inevitably bring. This practice of voluntary discomfort wasn't about punishment or self-denial. It was about strengthening character, building inner resolve, and learning to remain calm under pressure. In many ways, it's like training for a marathon. You wouldn't wait until race day to see if you can run 26 miles. You train your body bit by bit to handle that distance. The Stoics trained their minds and their emotions in the same way, through small, deliberate acts of stepping into discomfort. Think of failure as one of those acts of discomfort. Every time you take a calculated risk, whether it's presenting an ambitious idea at work, starting a new creative project, or even having a difficult conversation, you open yourself up to the possibility of failure. And that's not just okay, it's essential. Why? Because stepping into situations where you might fail is one of the most effective ways to grow. It forces you to confront your fears, challenge your limits, and more importantly, build resilience. Each setback becomes a chance to toughen your mental armor. Let's look at a practical example of how you can apply this. Suppose you're someone who has always stayed in your comfort zone when it comes to public speaking. The idea of presenting in front of a group makes you nervous, so you avoid it. But deep down, you know this is holding you back. The Stoic approach would be to deliberately place yourself in situations where you might fail, but where the stakes are manageable. Maybe you volunteer to speak at a small team meeting or join a local public speaking group. You're not throwing yourself into the deep end unprepared. You're intentionally facing discomfort one step at a time. Yes, it might feel awkward. Yes, you might stumble over your words, but each time you'll notice the fear diminishes and your skill grows. Over time, the very thing that once intimidated you becomes a source of confidence. This practice isn't just for individual challenges. It can be applied to almost any area of life. Afraid of rejection? Set a goal to start conversations with strangers, knowing some might not go as planned. Struggling with self-discipline? Try fasting for a day or skipping a minor luxury to remind yourself that you don't need external comforts to feel content. The point isn't the outcome, it's the process of training your mind and body to withstand discomfort and emerge stronger. By seeking out challenges voluntarily, you're essentially building a mental muscle. You're teaching yourself that discomfort isn't something to fear, but something to engage with, learn from, and overcome. Failure then takes on a new role. Instead of defining you, it becomes part of your training, a step on the path to becoming more adaptable, courageous, and capable. As you look at your own life, consider where you might intentionally seek discomfort. What risks have you been avoiding because you're afraid of failing? And what small steps could you take to face those fears head-on? Remember, every act of discomfort you embrace today is an investment in your resilience tomorrow. As Marcus Aurelius would say, the obstacle is truly the way. Failure and discomfort aren't here to stop you. They're here to shape you into the strongest version of yourself. When we experience failure, why does it feel so personal? Why does it sting so deeply, sometimes even more than the setback itself warrants? The truth is, much of that pain doesn't come from the failure itself, it comes from our ego. Ego has a way of magnifying failure, turning what might simply be a missed opportunity or a temporary setback into a question of worth. What does this say about me? Am I a failure? These thoughts don't come from the event, they come from our attachment to how we perceive ourselves. Stoicism offers a powerful antidote to this trap by teaching us to recognize and detach from our ego. Seneca, the Roman Stoic philosopher, once wrote about the dangers of letting our self-image grow too large. He reminded us that it is a rough road that leads to the heights of greatness, encouraging humility on the journey. According to Seneca, we must keep in mind that we are not defined by success or failure. Rather, we are defined by how we respond to life's challenges. The Stoics understood that ego, the inflated sense of self that ties self-worth to achievement, often blinds us to the lessons failure can teach. So, what happens when we let ego take the wheel? Imagine a scenario: you're passed over for a promotion at work. You've worked hard, invested your time and effort, and felt certain this opportunity was yours. When the news comes, you feel crushed. But now, instead of viewing the outcome as a neutral event, simply the result of external factors or perhaps areas for growth, your ego steps in and makes it personal. I deserved this. Why didn't they choose me? The hurt deepens, and instead of responding with clarity or curiosity, you may retreat into frustration, bitterness, or even self-pity. Ego turns failure into a reflection of you as a person, rather than just a momentary result. The Stoics saw this emotional spiral as unnecessary suffering. They taught that failure in itself isn't good or bad, it's neutral, it's just an event. What gives it meaning is our interpretation of it. Removing ego from the equation allows us to view failure more rationally. Instead of identifying with the setback, we can approach it with humility, asking, what factors contributed to this? What can I learn and do differently next time? When we remove the ego's obsession with how failure reflects on our worth, we create space to see it for what it really is: feedback, not judgment. Humility is key here. The Stoics believed that humility frees us from the weight of our ego's constant need for validation. If we accept ourselves as imperfect and constantly evolving individuals, failure becomes less threatening. It's no longer a blow to our identity, but a natural and useful part of our progress. By keeping ego in check, we remember that no single success or failure defines us. We are the sum of our actions, our efforts, and the lessons we choose to learn along the way. Consider this: when a child is learning to walk and falls, we don't see them as failures. We encourage them to get back up, to try again. Why? Because we know that falling isn't failure, it's just part of the learning process. But as we grow older, we let ego cloud this understanding. We begin to view every stumble as a reflection of our value rather than as a natural part of growth. The Stoics challenge us to return to that childlike clarity, to see failure for what it is, a necessary step forward. By detaching from ego, we're not suppressing ambition or standards for ourselves. Instead, we're freeing ourselves to pursue greatness with less fear. Without the ego's need to protect a fragile version of our identity, we can take risks, learn from mistakes, and keep moving forward. Failure stops being something to avoid and becomes something to embrace with humility as our guide. So the next time you face failure, ask yourself, is this really about the outcome, or is my ego complicating how I see the situation? By stepping back and aligning with the Stoic principle of humility, you'll find that what once felt like a devastating blow is often just another step on the path to growth. Failure, after all, is only as powerful as the meaning we choose to give it. In Stoicism, the ultimate goal isn't fame, fortune, or even comfort, it's living a virtuous life. But what does virtue mean in the Stoic sense? It's not about following rigid moral rules or striving for perfection. For the Stoics, virtue is a way of being. It's about embodying wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance in every aspect of your life. These four cardinal virtues form the foundation of a life well lived, and they guide your actions and decisions regardless of external circumstances. But here's the catch: you don't simply wake up one day as a virtuous person. Virtue, like a skill, is developed and refined through experience, and often it's through failure that we find the most fertile ground for growth. Why is failure so transformative in the pursuit of virtue? Because failure forces us to confront ourselves, our assumptions, our weaknesses, and our blind spots. It's a mirror reflecting back where we fall short of living wisely, courageously, or with balance. It's in these moments of discomfort that we have the chance to deepen our understanding of what it means to live virtuously. Marcus Aurelius put it beautifully when he wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." This strength he speaks of isn't about brute force. It's the strength of character that emerges when we use failure as a stepping stone to embody the virtues we value most. Take wisdom, for example. Wisdom isn't about knowing everything. It's about learning from experience, adapting to reality, and understanding what truly matters. Failure gives us the opportunity to cultivate wisdom because it challenges us to reflect. A failed business venture might teach you that chasing short-term gains leads to instability. A strained relationship might show you the importance of communication and empathy. These lessons, though often painful, add layers to your understanding of yourself and the world around you. Without failure, we'd lack these moments of insight. Now consider courage. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the willingness to act despite it. And what better way to develop courage than by facing failure head-on? Each time you attempt something meaningful and risk falling short, you're practicing courage. Failure tests your resolve. Will you stop trying because of fear, or will you persist with determination? Over time, these moments of boldness, of choosing to act despite uncertainty, build a foundation of bravery that strengthens with each challenge. Temperance, or self-control, is perhaps one of the most underappreciated virtues, yet failure offers endless opportunities to practice it. Imagine losing a promotion at work. Your immediate reaction might be anger, frustration, or even envy. But temperance calls us to pause, to restrain those impulsive emotions, and to respond with balance and composure. It teaches us to find peace in situations we cannot control, and to avoid being ruled by passions that cloud our judgment. Each failure becomes a chance to exercise self-discipline, making temperance not just an ideal but a habit. To see how failure leads to virtue in action, let's look at a historical example, Abraham Lincoln. Before he became one of the most celebrated leaders in history, Lincoln faced a series of crushing failures. He lost multiple elections, struggled in business, and faced devastating personal losses. But through each setback, he sharpened his wisdom, deepened his courage, and strengthened his sense of justice. By the time he became president, these virtues were evident in how he led a divided nation through its darkest period. His failures didn't define him, they refined him. They were stepping stones that built his character and prepared him for the immense challenges ahead. So, when you think about failure, try to reframe it. Instead of seeing it as a sign of inadequacy, see it as part of your journey toward virtue. Every time you fall short, you are presented with a choice. Will you let this moment defeat you, or will you use it to grow wiser, braver, and more composed? Marcus Aurelius reminds us, the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. In other words, failure isn't a detour on the path to virtue, it is the path. And if you embrace it, you'll find it leads to strength you never thought possible. Why does failure sometimes feel unbearable? More often than not, it's because we're deeply attached to the outcome we were striving for. We tie our identity, our happiness, or even our sense of self-worth to a specific result. Whether it's a promotion, a relationship, or a major life goal, we invest so much of ourselves into achieving it that, when it doesn't happen, the disappointment cuts deeper than it needs to. The Stoics understood this all too well. They taught that attachment to outcomes can make failure far more painful than it needs to be, and they offered a powerful remedy: detachment. Epictetus, one of the most practical Stoic philosophers, famously said, "Do not seek to have events happen as you wish, but wish them to happen as they do, and your life will go smoothly." What he's pointing to is the power of shifting focus from obsessing over external results to grounding ourselves in what we can control, our own effort. The Stoics believed that while we should absolutely strive for excellence and work hard toward our goals, we should simultaneously let go of clinging to the idea that we can control the outcomes. Why? Because no matter how much effort we pour into something, the ultimate results are often shaped by factors beyond our control: circumstance, timing, the actions of others. And when we attach our happiness or self-worth to those external, uncontrollable outcomes, we set ourselves up for unnecessary suffering. Imagine training for months for a marathon. You follow your plan meticulously, only to sprain your ankle a week before the race. If your entire sense of fulfillment was tied to crossing the finish line on race day, this situation feels devastating. But if you see the training process itself as the real achievement, the discipline, the consistency, the growth, you can still find pride and meaning in your effort even without the race. This is the essence of Stoic detachment, focusing on what you can control, your intentions, actions, mindset, while releasing your grip on the final result. But how do we actually practice this kind of detachment in daily life? It starts with a subtle but profound shift in thinking. First, remind yourself regularly of what is within your sphere of control and what isn't. Epictetus provides a straightforward framework. Your actions, decisions, and mindset are yours to command, but outcomes, whether you win or lose, succeed or fail, are not. By clearly distinguishing between the two, you can begin to loosen the grip of attachment to results. One practical exercise is to focus on setting process goals instead of outcome goals. For example, if you're working toward a promotion at work, you might replace the outcome goal of getting the promotion with a process goal of consistently delivering high-quality work and seeking feedback. This reframing places your success within your control because it emphasizes the effort and intention you bring to the table rather than the final decision, which may depend on factors like company politics or budget constraints. Another useful practice is to reflect on the idea of impermanence. The Stoics often meditated on the transient nature of life, reminding themselves that success and failure alike are fleeting. This isn't meant to be discouraging, it's liberating. When you realize that no single outcome, no matter how big or small, defines your life, you stop clinging so tightly to the idea of winning or losing. You begin to see life as a continuous journey of growth, shaped not by whether you succeeded or failed in any given moment, but by how you chose to respond. Finally, gratitude can be a powerful tool for practicing detachment. When you find yourself overly fixated on an outcome, take a moment to pause and look at all the things you already have to be grateful for. This helps shift your focus away from what you feel you're lacking and brings your attention back to the abundance already present in your life. It's a reminder that your worth doesn't hinge on a single success or failure. Detachment isn't about giving up or caring less, it's about caring in a healthier, more sustainable way. It's about pouring your energy into what you can control, your effort, your character, your choices, and releasing the rest. When you stop clinging to outcomes, you free yourself from the fear of failure because you realize that, no matter the result, what truly matters is how you show up and grow along the way. As Epictetus might say, the ultimate victory is mastering your own mind. Failure often feels like it traps us in a loop, doesn't it? We replay the mistakes over and over, dwell on what could have been, and worry endlessly about how it might happen again in the future. Yet, the Stoics offer us a different way, a way to break out of this cycle by balancing reflection on the past with thoughtful preparation for the future. It's not about ignoring failure or acting like it didn't happen. Instead, it's about learning from it, applying those lessons, and moving forward with purpose and clarity. So, how does failure fit into this balance? First, let's talk about reflection. For the Stoics, looking back at the past isn't about regret or self-criticism, it's about understanding. Marcus Aurelius, in his Meditations often reminded himself to reflect with honesty but without judgment. When we fail, the key is to ask productive questions. What went wrong? What were the factors under my control? What can I do differently next time? The Stoics believed that without this kind of reflection, we're bound to repeat the same mistakes. But at the same time, they warned against getting stuck in the past. Reflection is meant to guide us, not chain us to old wounds. After all, the past is unchangeable. The only purpose it serves is as a teacher. On the other side of the balance is preparation. Stoicism teaches us that while we can't control the future, we can prepare for it. One of the most powerful exercises the Stoics practiced was Premeditatio Malorum or the Premeditation of Evils. This exercise involves mentally anticipating challenges and setbacks before they happen, not to dwell on negativity, but to reduce fear and anxiety. Imagine stepping into the unknown already knowing that failure is a possibility and mentally rehearsing how you would handle it. Would you regroup and try again? Would you adapt and pivot to a new approach? When you've thought these scenarios through in advance, failure feels less like a shock and more like something you're ready for. It helps you respond calmly rather than reacting emotionally. Here's how Premeditatio Malorum might look in practice. Let's say you're preparing to present a bold new idea to your team at work. A Stoic approach would be to take a moment beforehand and consider, what could go wrong? What if the idea isn't well received, or if someone points out flaws I hadn't considered? But then you go a step further. You plan how you would respond. Perhaps you decide to calmly thank them for their feedback, clarify your points, or even take their suggestions as a way to strengthen your idea. By mentally walking through these possible outcomes, you've not only lessened your fear of rejection, but also equipped yourself with a strategy. The failure, if it happens, doesn't knock you down, it becomes part of the process. But here's where the real magic of Stoicism lies. After reflecting on the past and preparing for the future, the Stoics remind us to come back to the present. Because while it's important to learn from failure and prepare for setbacks, life is lived in the moment. Marcus Aurelius writes, "Do not let your thoughts be stolen away by the past or the future." Once you've done the work, examined your past failures, prepared for possible future ones, it's time to focus fully on the task at hand. This is how the Stoics found freedom from the burdens of regret and anxiety. They acted with purpose in the present, grounded by their preparation but not paralyzed by fear. So here's a question to reflect on for yourself. How do you balance the lessons of your past failures with planning for your future growth? Do you spend too much time reliving what's already happened or worrying about what might go wrong? What if instead you use those moments of failure to guide your next steps while still allowing yourself to live fully in the present? In the end, failure isn't just a bump in the road, it's one of the most valuable tools we have for building a better future. And with the Stoic mindset, we can carry the wisdom of our past and the courage for our future without letting either weigh us down. Failure, when you really think about it, is just another part of life's natural order. It's not some great anomaly or personal injustice. It's simply one of the many events that unfold as we live, guided by forces far beyond our control. The Stoics, with their profound understanding of the universe, saw failure not as a catastrophe, but as an inevitable and even essential part of human existence. To them, it was no different from the changing of the seasons, the rising and setting of the sun, or the falling of a leaf. As Marcus Aurelius put it in his Meditations, everything that happens is as natural as the rose in spring or the fruit in summer. These words capture a fundamental Stoic belief. Failure isn't something unnatural or inherently negative, it's simply life unfolding as it must. By framing failure this way, the Stoics freed themselves from the emotional turbulence that often accompanies setbacks. They understood that the universe operates according to its own logic, governed by a web of causes and conditions that we may never fully comprehend. Marcus Aurelius often reflected on this in his writings, reminding himself to see events as neither good nor bad, but as part of the larger natural order. When faced with difficulty, he urged himself to ask, "Why should this upset me? What's so unfamiliar or unexpected about it? Isn't it just the nature of things to change, to challenge, to disrupt?" This perspective fundamentally changes how we experience failure. Instead of viewing it as an interruption to our plans or a personal failing, we can start to see it as something neutral, something that simply is asterisk. Imagine standing by a river and watching the current carry branches and debris downstream. You wouldn't scream at the water for flowing in a certain direction or try to force it to behave differently. You'd accept that the river flows as it must. In much the same way, the Stoics teach us to accept life's events, including failure, as things that happen naturally and inevitably. This acceptance doesn't mean passivity or giving up. On the contrary, it means staying grounded, calm, and ready to respond constructively when things don't go as planned. Let's take an example from daily life. Suppose you've been preparing for a major job interview. You study, practice, and give it your best shot, but in the end, the offer goes to someone else. The initial reaction might be disappointment, frustration, or even self-doubt. But the Stoic perspective invites us to pause and ask, is this outcome unnatural? Did the universe somehow betray me by not delivering what I wanted? The answer, of course, is no. The hiring decision was shaped by countless factors, many of which were beyond your control, like the other candidate's qualifications or the hiring manager's preferences. In the grand scheme of things, this failure is no more unusual than a cloudy day after weeks of sunshine. It's not personal, it's just life. This principle of living in accord with nature is especially powerful because it helps us stay calm and grounded during setbacks. When we stop resisting reality, when we stop wishing things were different than they are, we free ourselves from unnecessary suffering. Instead of spinning in frustration or blaming ourselves for events beyond our control, we can redirect our energy toward what truly matters, adapting, learning, and continuing forward. Failure, then, becomes an opportunity to align ourselves with the flow of life rather than fight against it. But how do we actually practice living in accord with nature when failure strikes? One approach is to remind yourself, as Marcus Aurelius did, that nature is impartial. The universe isn't conspiring against you, it's simply unfolding. By accepting this, you can shift your focus from "why me" to "what now?" Another practice is to train yourself to view setbacks as temporary and inevitable, much like a storm passing through the sky. Just as the storm eventually clears, so too will this moment of failure. What remains is how you choose to navigate it, so the next time you face a setback, consider the Stoic view. See failure not as a disruption to the natural order, but as an essential part of it. By aligning your perspective with this principle, you'll find yourself calmer, more resilient, and better equipped to move forward with purpose. Because in the end, failure isn't the adversary, it's just another chapter in the ever-changing story of life. Failure is not the end of the journey, it's the terrain we must navigate to grow stronger, wiser, and more resilient. From a Stoic perspective, failure isn't an obstacle meant to stop us. Instead, it's a tool, a teacher that offers valuable lessons if we're willing to listen. It's a natural part of life, and when we learn to view it this way, it no longer feels like a personal attack on our worth or capability. Instead, it becomes a stepping stone on the path to self-improvement. Think about everything we've explored so far. The Stoics teach us to detach from outcomes, understanding that while we can control our effort and our mindset, the results often lie beyond our control. They show us that by shifting our focus to the process rather than the outcome, we free ourselves from the fear of failure. We can act with courage and authenticity, knowing that even if we fall short, the effort itself is meaningful, and it's where true growth happens. Resilience, another cornerstone of Stoicism, reminds us that failure is not a reflection of who we are but an opportunity to build strength. Just as a muscle grows stronger through resistance, we grow more adaptable and capable by facing setbacks head-on. Every stumble, every closed door, every difficult moment is a chance to practice perseverance, to rise again with greater clarity and determination. The Stoics saw failure not as a final verdict on our abilities, but as raw material we can shape into something greater. And then there's the idea of failure as feedback. Rather than viewing setbacks as personal defeats, the Stoics encourage us to see them as mirrors reflecting where we can improve. By calmly and honestly reflecting on our missteps, we gain insight into what needs adjustment, whether it's our approach, our mindset, or even our goals themselves. This feedback loop is essential for growth, and failure is often the most honest teacher we'll ever have. To bring this all together, consider the words of Seneca, who said, "The bravest sight in the world is to see a great man struggling against adversity." This isn't about avoiding hardship or setbacks, it's about embracing them as part of the journey. It's about showing up again and again despite the challenges and choosing to persevere. What the Stoics understood and what we can take from their wisdom is that failure isn't permanent. It's not a dead end. It's a turning point, one that holds the potential to change us for the better. As this video comes to a close, I want to leave you with a call to action. Take a moment to reflect on your own experiences with failure. Think about the setbacks that once felt overwhelming. How did they shape you? What lessons did they teach, and how have you grown because of them? More importantly, how can you apply Stoic principles to face future challenges with more strength and perspective, knowing that each failure is simply part of the process? Life will always have its ups and downs, its triumphs and its failures. But if we choose to adopt the Stoic mindset to detach from outcomes, to build resilience, and to see failure as feedback, we can move forward with clarity and purpose. The next time you stumble, remember the wisdom of the Stoics. The obstacle isn't here to stop you, it's here to help you grow.